Vancouver. Beautiful, vibrant, and brimming with contradiction. Beneath its shimmering skyline and picturesque waterfront lies a city with secrets. A city shaped by shadows, where the line between good and evil often blurs. For Sam Wiebe, these contradictions aren't just scenery, they're inspiration. Through his crime novels, he brings Vancouver to life as more than a backdrop. It's a character, unpredictable, flawed, and endlessly fascinating. His stories explore the gritty reality of urban life, where truth and fiction often collide, and the pursuit of justice isn't always black and white. But what drives him to write about this underbelly of the city he calls home? And why do these stories resonate so deeply with readers? This is the story of Sam Wiebe, Vancouver's master of crime fiction, and the city that shapes his world.
As a kid, I used to just read anything that I could get my hands on, and I really didn't like kids' books that much, and YA didn't really exist at that time. So I would always just grab stuff from the adult section of the library or that my parents were reading. And I remember my mom had a copy of Red Harvest by Dashiell Hammett, which is one of the best PI novels. And it was a 70s paperback with a stack of bullets on the cover, and it just looked like nothing else. And I read it and loved it. And that's really like where it all started. And then a few years later, we were at the Joe Fortes branch of the library. And I found a book that said was called How to Write Action Adventure Novels. and got that out of the library, and it made it real that there were people who actually wrote these books that I loved and did this for a living. And from that point on, I was just fascinated with the pulp genre and the writers that came up at that time. Writers like John D. MacDonald and Ross MacDonald, Kurt Vonnegut, all the way up to Walter Mosley, Sue Grafton, and the private eye writers of the 90s. Basically, I start with an idea of the story that is not quite a fully fleshed outline, but I kind of have an idea of where I want it to go. And I sort of look at it like playing like a jazz tune, where you know what the structure is, and then you're kind of improvising over that. So, a typical day, my wife Carly leaves at about 5:30. So I'm up and make coffee and pack her lunch, feed the cat, and then just start work. And I usually stop writing around 11 or noon, go for a nice walk, and then deal with writing business, teaching, and things like that. I write by hand, so that takes a little bit more time to write it and then type it up. But the trade-off is a lot more focus and concentration. And then you also get that other revision. You get to revise it one more time when you're typing it up. So I think it's a pretty solid process for me. It's time consuming. I wouldn't recommend it for anyone else, but it really works for me. Style is such an interesting idea because obviously when you're starting out, you're copying people. So, Hammett and Chandler are sort of the north and south pole of private eye fiction. Hammett's very terse, Chandler's very loquacious, full of great metaphors and things like that. But as you read more people, you pick up little bits, and sometimes it's very conscious and sometimes it's just unconscious. Someone like Elmore Leonard writes, really terrific dialogue, very realistic scenes with underworld people and crooks. Someone like Walter Mosley, the way he writes about what it means to own a house really, really stuck with me. And that idea of being a responsible part of society and dealing with some of the pressures. And then someone like Sue Grafton, she's just endlessly inventive in the scenarios that she gets her detective into. So, you try to just pick up stuff from everything you read, whether it's good or bad. I look at writing as a job, and the writers that I idolize, people like John D. MacDonald and Ross MacDonald, they treated it like a job. They didn't wait for inspiration to strike. They got up every morning, and it was either you write a book this year or you go work at the family Saab dealership. So I try to do that. Whether I'm inspired or not, I, put the time in. Sometimes you end up, after spending a whole day with, your pad and paper, you've got half a page. Sometimes you have a page and it's garbage. And sometimes you have really great days. But I try not to wait for inspiration. But sometimes it's hard. And, walking is definitely something that I do to just kind of help jog that. But also reading the newspaper, trying to be engaged with what's going on. All of those things kind of help, keep ideas coming in and keep you from getting stale. Yeah, so Wakeland has been optioned a couple times. The first time it was writer and director, and I was a part of it, and we had just creative differences about whether or not to make it set in Vancouver or sort of set in like any town, USA, vaguely Pacific Northwest, like a lot of shows are set. And that sort of fell apart because of that. And then the second time, it was a company that optioned it. I was not involved in the creative process, and then the strike happened, and they lost their connection at the streamers. So it's an ongoing thing. I'm always happy to discuss that and be a part of it, but I also feel like the film and TV business is a little bit different than writing a book and making it as good as you can and then trying to sell it. It's trying to anticipate what other people think will be popular, which is just such a losing game to me. And Canada doesn't make a lot of those kind of shows. We tend to make a lot of stuff that is either set vaguely in the States or is on the lighter side, and this is more realistic. So it's been a little bit of a struggle. The most challenging aspect of writing a novel to me is the business and the publishing side of it. I've been very lucky with that, but I love writing and I love revision. Those are not difficult for me, but I've had to get I've had to become more comfortable with selling myself, which is not something that I like to do, with being proactive with my career, trying to email people about events, setting things up, making sure that the events I do are professional. So just trying to maintain that sort of professionalism is difficult. I mean, everybody wants you to work for free. Everybody wants you to, compromise, but just sort of figuring out which battles to fight and holding to that is difficult. Research is one of those things where it never stops and it never really starts. I will talk to people one-on-one. I will read books or articles. I've gone through academic books on criminology and things like that. For certain books, I've talked to bank robbers. It's a process where the fuel of the series is what's going on with Vancouver and my readings in private eye fiction. So those two things are just going on all the time. Like, I'm always reading something or watching an old Rockford Files, and then I'm always, trying to figure out what's going on in Vancouver and in the area. And then even after you finish a book, you're always, learning things and kind of salting them in, or realizing that you don't know enough about a certain subject and doing a little bit more research. One famous writer, Ian Rankin, said that he actually doesn't do research before he writes. It's only after he's written it that he realizes what he needs to know, and then he goes and just, reads up on those specific things. But it's a continuous process. The best advice I could give aspiring authors is to finish what you start. So if you're writing a novel, don't rewrite chapter 1 a billion times. Get to the end, because at least when you get to the end, you know what it feels like to write a novel, and that is training that you just can't get no matter what writing course or book you pick up. It really is one of those things where the only way to really learn how to write a novel is to do it. Write short stories and read short stories, because as you write and revise and submit a story for publication, you're going through all the same steps you're going through with a novel, just in miniature. So you can do that and really, build up your skills and also your stomach for, submission and getting rejected. My novel, Last of the Independents, was shortlisted and then won the Unpublished Manuscript Award from the Crime Writers of Canada. So part of that was an offer of publication. So that was sort of the first book. And not having an agent, not having any idea of the publishing industry, they sent the contract in and I just signed that thing and sent it back. Probably a mistake, but when you're starting out, you're just so excited to have somebody say yes that you go for it. With the Wakeland series, it's really important to me that he's a character who knows what's right and what's wrong, but he's also somebody who lives in Vancouver, so he's implicated. He's a part of all of these systems of oppression, things like that. So he's not, parachuting in from above to save the day. He's somebody who's, slowly realizing how complex and compromised his own existences. So I just try to create characters that I think are realistic, and also that are tied to a place in some of the ways that I feel tied to Vancouver. The biggest challenge about writing about Vancouver is that it changes so quickly that by the time you write about a place, it's probably gone. I mean, there are restaurants and places that are in Invisible Dead that were gone by the time the book got published. It's a city with rapid both social change and gentrification. So whole neighborhoods are just changing. And, that can be a real challenge. The other challenge is getting an international audience to care about a Canadian story. I always feel like this is a Pacific Northwest or a Vancouver story. It doesn't necessarily reflect the rest of Canada, but, American-Canadian relationships are difficult. I'm not a tough guy, and I have been exposed to crime and certain things, but, I'm the last person who'd try to, represent myself as being some sort of ass kicker. What is realistic about the books is that Wakeland as a character is somebody who's been struggling to find his niche in society and deal with both the struggles of living in Vancouver, just in terms of, gentrification and how expensive and how difficult it can be to live here. So those are things that I've lived and that I reflect in the books. And then also just the sort of moral complexity as you find out more about the history of Vancouver, the fact that it's on, the unceded territory of 3 First Nations, the fact that it has one of the oldest Chinatowns and a long history of racial antagonism. These are things that just kind of inform the day-to-day life of the city, as well as dealing with yoga billionaires and all this sort of other junk that we end up having to deal with. The neighborhoods that I always come back to in Vancouver are Commercial Drive, which I love, and I lived there for about a decade. I mean, I feel like that's really the heart of Vancouver in terms of, it was an immigrant neighborhood, and it's sort of the heart of the counterculture in Vancouver. But it's also just a really pleasant place to be, and I love the Drive a lot. And Mount Pleasant is the other one, just because there's so many great small businesses there. Pulp Fiction Books and Book Warehouse, great coffee shops, the libraries there. So those are sort of the most important neighborhoods for me. I mean, that's just personal, and that's reflected in the story too.
Wiebe has won the Kobo Emerging Writers Prize, 2 Crime Writers of Canada Awards. He's also been nominated for the Edgar, Hammett, Shamus, and City of Vancouver Book Prizes. He joins us today from New Westminster, BC. Welcome, Sam.
Thank you so much. I'm going to start with a really bad joke. If you live in Toronto, where is the best place to buy books? Victoria. BC has more great bookshops than any other province. We're a cultural center known all over the world, yet often our cultural institutions are geared toward other cultures, particularly the US and UK. I was guilty of this myself. I grew up reading detective novels set in LA, London, New York, Edinburgh, anywhere but here. A detective novel is entertainment, but it's also a travel guide, a social history, and a reflection of how we feel about the place we live. My own books are set in BC because it's the place I know best, and because it's fascinating to me. I grew up with X-Files and other shows using Vancouver to stand in for other cities. Rumble in the Bronx, Jason Takes Manhattan. Those are us. Yet our history is both interesting and elusive. We're known the world over, yet we're not always known to ourselves. BC publishers are essential to our cultural voice. I've worked with Howard and Anna at Harbor on 5 books now. None of these, sad to say, has made us multi-billionaires, which is why I took the ferry over this morning rather than my personal helijet. But each of these has done well domestically. They found an audience in the rest of the world and the rest of Canada. They've won and been nominated for international awards, and most exciting to me, each seems to be building on the last. Harbor and the other publishers here are figuring out how to tell stories that the world wants to hear, how to publish books that the world wants to read. I can't tell you how rare and exciting that is for a writer to find. Authors, publishers, bookshops, and readers are in a symbiotic partnership. It's one that has to contend with big box retailers, AI, vanity presses, predatory marketers, and a host of people who think that if it's not Harry Potter, it's not worth publishing. BC publishers have to contend with all of that every year. What they have on their side are great stories, like Rachel Pham's Restaurant Kid about second-generation Asian Canadians, Garth Mullen's addiction memoir Crackdown, the new mystery from Iona Wishaw, a new poetry collection by Evelyn Lau, new true crime from Edith Lazarus. If I was slightly more shameless, I would plug my own new novel, The Last Exile, on the BC bestseller list for its 6th week, but modesty prevents me. Obviously, I'm very biased on this subject as an author, but I'm also a reader, and I was a reader first. This is actually Sam's day at Monroe's, with a brief stop at the legislature. As a reader, the only place I see the world that I recognize, the world as it is for us in 2025, are from books by BC publishers. Please support them all you can. They are essential. Thank you so much.
When you grow up in a place, you just see it differently than people who move there because it's so beautiful or see it on television. So growing up, not only did I get to know where certain things were shot and filmed, but there was also that secret history of who owned which building, what kind of crimes had happened there, historically what had happened, things like the anti-Chinese riots. So all of that is sort of the subtext that goes into the books. I think the worst thing you can do with noir is to try to capture the stuff that worked in the 1930s and 40s and just transpose it to 2025 or 6. To me, that just makes everything seem like a cliche and a joke, where you have women with shoulder pads and, standing in front of Venetian blinds and things like that. So what I try to do is think about where those cliches or archetypes come from and find new ways to approach them. If the femme fatale as a character is somebody who's known for being really seductive and dangerous, there are ways to be seductive and dangerous that aren't that stereotypical over-the-top evil femininity from movies in the 1940s. The tone of noir is really specific, and for me, I try to put the realistic side of Vancouver in conversation with the tourist side. So the kind of things that tourists don't really get to see, addiction, homelessness, and some of the social problems, to not just focus on those, but to make sure that those are in the picture, as well as the nicer parts of the city and some of the more glamorous things that people are familiar with from, tourist videos and some of the films shot in Hollywood North and things like that. Well, I think that even though noir can be really stylized and, at times over the top, it's also very realistic. It doesn't have happy endings. It doesn't have characters where, everything works out for them. And I really, gravitated to that. It felt like something true. The hardest thing for me about writing in the noir genre is that it's very easy to fall into the trap of trying to be edgy or dark just for the sake of being edgy or dark. And there's nothing more excruciating to read than somebody who's just trying to throw in a bunch of violence and a bunch of gross stuff for no reason. I try to find a reason for the things that happen in the book, The violence has weight to it. It hurts the characters. There are consequences to it, and it's not done lightly. So when people say that the books are violent, well, I think that crime fiction should have a realistic approach to violence. It's not the only approach. Cozy novels are fine, but I think that good crime fiction looks at things like violence, and especially murder, head on. Writing careers are very strange, and they have a lot of ups and downs that nobody else really sees. And I hope to just continue writing my Wakeland series and the Ethan Brand series as long as I can, and see if I can get some film and TV projects off the ground. But the most important thing to me is to just be able to write and to continue doing this. So that's really my goal. Just every morning get up and work as well as I can. And as cliched as it is, that's really all that's in the writer's control. It's just putting in the effort and trying to make what you put out in the world as good as you can.